Here we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our very first episode ever. Leisha and I are super excited. And like we said, we wanted to talk about a quote that really just blew me away. And it is, I'm not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am.
That one
Crazy.
will really mess you up.
So, because we've always thought, well, I always been really insecure growing up, right? And just because of this whole self care and self help stuff, it's really built up my confidence a lot. So now that I read this quote, it doesn't make me feel like, fetal position on the floor and just like crying from this quote. It was just like, oh, I wish I knew this 10 years ago.
All right, well, let's break it down. So the first part is I am not who you think I am. And
No, the
that
first part, I am not who
just
I think I am.
just kidding. I am not who I think I am. Okay. Hmm. Well, I don't even know what to say to that part. I am not who I think I am.
Because maybe the person that you see is is all jaded from all this pain and all this. Let's say you have these stories that you tell, and it reminds me of a quote that Tony Robbins teaches. He always says, change your story, change your life.
Hmm.
So what if the story I told myself was when I was really young, someone said, oh, you're such a loser, you always lose. So I think I'm a loser. But that goes back to the quote, I am not who I think I am. I am not alluded to other people when they see me, they're like, oh, Julie, you're not this person, or you're not a loser, quote unquote, right? But the story that I believed was that I was.
Yeah. So you adopted, but see, I'm getting twisted over here because you adopted what other people said you were, which is exactly what the quote says. So the way I
Oh,
think about I am not who I think I am, I think we understand our best intentions all the time. So I know what I intend to present, but I don't always know how that's received. So I look at myself differently than how other people might look at me. I might think that I'm such a philanthropist and such a person who's just so kind and generous. And I might have blind spots to my flaws because
right, right, right.
I'm not on the receiving end of my own behavior. So I understand myself in a much different way than other people might understand me.
Right. Okay, okay. Actually, that makes more sense. So let's say you say something to me and you use a trigger word that I have but you don't have, right? So you triggered me and I start thinking, oh, this person is not very generous. This person is not whatever. But so in a way, Alicia thinks that she is XYZ, but I think she is someone else. So who are you?
Yeah. And then it gets even trickier when you move into I'm not who other people think I am because exactly what you just said, I may have triggered you one day and I may have presented differently to different people. I know I can be different depending on who I'm around. There we go. Let's get that out. So different people might describe me differently.
Oh, right. Then if you add the very last part, I am who I think I am who I think you think I am. But what if you don't care what other people think of you?
That would be real ideal, I think. I don't think that's normal for the human condition, I'll be honest. I think most of
Yeah,
us care.
because
Uh,
how can you not care? How can you say that whatever your experience, and just say that it doesn't, it doesn't trigger you? I don't know if I believe that. I don't believe that someone has no triggers. No triggers, none.
Maybe like Deepak Chopra, who spends 4 to 5 hours a day meditating and like transcends every single emotion.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be hard to trigger him, but I feel like for the most part, we aren't spending that long meditating and transcending our emotions. So for the most part, yes, we're going to be impacted by what other people think.
So do you think it's like 90% of the population is being impacted, but that 10% that really truly feels like solidified with themselves and has really crazy amount of self-worth, those are the 10%, but would you consider them the most successful 10%?
Mm-mm. No, I don't really know that it has anything to do with success, but I think it has to do with enlightenment, perhaps, and maybe like spirituality and thinking about things in a much bigger picture. You know, most of us humans, I think, are like uh focused on whatever our tasks are for the day. Like we got on this call and you said, my day's been so busy and it's only 2:30, right? And that's what our focus usually is, like, what do I have to do today? What do I have to get through? But in the big picture, today and all these little tasks don't matter hardly at all.
Right.
So I think these people who are enlightened and maybe spiritually transcending their emotions, I'm just calling it spiritual, not saying that it's like a religious thing, but it's like it takes a lot of effort to start thinking about things in a more elevated way. So I don't know what else to call it other than spiritual. But I think it takes a lot of self-discipline too to get there. So these people are probably just committed to thinking about things in a different way.
Do you think they started where all humans start and they had to train themselves and condition themselves to feel how they feel now?
Some of them may have, you know, there's a lot of monks out here who are now talking about their experience in the I don't know what you call that where the monks stay. I want to say
Monastery?
I wanted to say that, but I thought that's where nuns stayed. I don't really
Oh, you're right. Temples?
Yeah, maybe it's a temp. I don't know.
I don't know. Trying not to
But
offend people out there. Just
yeah, I think those some of those people maybe had have similar experiences to us where like they were looking for something because they were hurting. But I also think there are people who are just born different and they just think differently. And maybe that's, you know, I have no idea like as far as spiritual belief systems go. I don't subscribe to any one thing. But some people say that if you've been reincarnated enough, then you're like you finally reach this a more enlightened version of a human being. And I don't know, maybe that's true. Maybe these people have just ridiculously old souls and they finally like tapped into the secret of life. Um,
I don't know. Well, I'm not gonna knock on that. I don't know. I'm not very religious myself. So it's like, really? But
I have no idea. But all I'm saying is some people seem to be born different. Like
that's true.
Wayne Dyer, I think, was like a spiritual guru. I think he's passed away now, but I've listened to some of his stuff and he's said that he was born different. Like his perspective was always more optimistic and positive, and it was like he knew what he was capable of from a young age and never had to struggle. Well, not that he never had struggles, but he always did better even than the people who were struggling with him.
Oh. Do you know if that's actually true? I remember listening to an audiobook that he wrote. I don't know which book off the top of my head right now, but he did talk about his kids. And he said that some of his kids were born knowing and some of his kids had to struggle through it. So, and it's true. If you think about your own family and your friends and everything, like we just all are so different from each other.
Yeah. And I think what's his name? Gary V. I don't remember his like full last name. It's something long.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
Gary
super.
Vee
uh,
talks about like for the majority of us, we're gonna be bothered by what people say, but it's how much do we let it dictate what happens in our life? Does it ruin your whole day? Does it make you take your post down? Does it make you change something in your business? Or does it just hurt your feelings and then you let it go and you keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I like that. And maybe that's what the quote you should do. If you understand it, you go, hey, I am who I think you think I am. So once we know that it's like, oh, who I am to you is who I am, right? And I realize I don't necessarily agree with that, or that hurts me, or just owning that feeling and going, okay, well, we can't do anything about that anyway, right? Because I can't, as much as I try to empathize with you, let's even Alicia, right? When we have, millions of conversations about this stuff, but it's like, as much as I try to empathize with who you are or where you grew up and whatever, I can't. Your collection of experiences at the end of the day are completely different from mine. So I will try to, but at the end of the day, I can't. So maybe we could just take this quote and say, this hurt me, or this, I understand that you view me as this, but I view myself as something else, and just own that.
Yes. And I think also understanding that we're a collection of things. So I can be who you think I am and who I think I am at the same time. And I can be a collection of all of my experiences with I am a collection of all of my experiences.
Yes,
Which is
yes.
so
I
funny.
like, my jaw is on the floor right now for the listeners. Yeah, you can't see, but I'm like, oh my god, you got that. Like, yes, yes, yes. Whatever, you were on a roll, and that's exactly that really is it. It reminds me of this song that Alanis Morissette came out with, and I forgot what the name is. I'm terrible with like names and titles and all this stuff. But anyway, she came out with the song, and it said basically, I am beautiful and ugly and mean and nice, and but I'm all of it. And it so rings true what we're talking about right now. We're literally all of it. We're a collection of experiences. We have the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the beautiful, and whatever. So, and it's okay and it's normal.
Yeah, I was talking to a client earlier today about the fact that everybody disappoints. It doesn't matter how good of a person you are or how hard you try to make everybody happy. Eventually, at some point, you're going to disappoint people or upset someone because we're just human beings and that's what we do. And that can be okay.
But what if you're disappointing somebody else because they have different, um, priorities or expectations, but your expectation of whatever it is that you're disappointing isn't disappointing yourself? Is that really a disappointment then?
That's a great question. Oh, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this stuff right now. I think in the quote, it's saying that I view myself the way I assume you see me.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, we can't fully understand how another person would view us. So I think probably our best bet is to view ourselves, come to an understanding that we have many different facets of ourselves and that we're capable of many different things, and maybe decide what degree and frequency, maybe that's what it is.
Well, my way explain that.
How often are we disappointing and how bad is it? Do we want to add this to our list of characteristics? Is it that bad and that often, or is it like sometimes I disappoint?
Or are you disappointing the same person because that person has unrealistic expectations of you?
Right.
Or that person could be toxic, and no matter what's a moving target, so you're always going to disappoint.
Ooh, That's true. You know what? I was thinking about toxic people when you said, maybe let's say 10% of the population doesn't care what people think. And I feel like some toxic people, like psychopaths, for example,
Oh, yeah.
might be a part of that list. Like, yeah, they don't give a shit what we have to say.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily good. That's true. I always thought not caring what other people thought was a positive connotation, right? And maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Click
I think
to
we
that.
need empathy to some degree at least. So if we're empathetic, then we would be sad that we hurt someone's feelings.
But the wording of that, caring what other people think, instead of seeing that with a negative connotation, just replace that with empathy. When you empathize with somebody, you are caring what they think.
Yeah. And I think about when I'm talking to clients, I tell them like, you've got to filter the feedback that you're getting through who that person is. So if, let's say, you're dealing with a narcissist or a psychopath, any feedback they give you is coming from a ridiculously selfish place. And it also has a high potential to be projection and not reality.
Mm.
So anytime they give us feedback, we have to know that. I also think about my own therapist, and she told me early on that she's not a risk taker, that she doesn't feel comfortable taking a lot of risks. She likes to take the safe route with things. And
Uh,
I know that that's not me. I'm not a safe person. I don't always like to take the safe route. That sounds boring. So when she gives me feedback, I try to filter it through that.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But what if you didn't catch that, right? What going back to disappointing people, right? What if you didn't realize what other people's filters are? And let's say even your therapist, you might feel like you're disappointing her when you're like, "Hey, I'm going bungee jumping. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna just quit my job and I'm gonna try this thing." And she's like, they're peeing her pants, you know. She's like, "Oh my god, what is she? She's psycho, or whatever she might be thinking." But if you didn't filter and realize, oh, she's really risk adverse.
Yeah.
So whatever she's saying, I'm gonna see it through those filters. But you weren't aware enough to understand that, so you feel like you're disappointing her.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a reality often that we don't know. If it depends on how well we know a person, whether or not we can properly filter the information. And so, maybe if you're starting out a romantic relationship and somebody gives you feedback, you're really taking that to heart, but also you don't really know this person super well yet.
Yeah,
So should we be taking their feedback to heart?
yeah.
And I think, just talking about this is making me a little anxious because I'm like, well, hell, whose feedback do you listen to?
That's a good question.
How do I know anything?
What do we listen to? We listen to anybody?
I know. So I guess ultimately we have to have somewhat of a concept of ourselves and be able to find some level of confidence in that.
Yeah. You just need to believe in yourself.
Yeah. I tell my clients like the part of building self-esteem, for some reason, still to this day, when we talk about self-esteem, people think it means like putting on your makeup and getting dressed up. But the heart of self-esteem is your core self. And so we have to do some self-discovery to figure out who we are at our core and what our strengths are. And then we can build confidence in those things.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Uh, and I and that really would reduce what you even define as disappointment. And because I've been in multiple types of toxic relationships, a romantic one, um, you know, a platonic one and everything. And in those, they were just moving targets. I would never be able to win. Like, let's say I remember one time I would always have to and this one I was a lot younger. And it wasn't my parents, just clearing that up. But it was, I was always had to bring a glass of water to this person. And I remember she would be like, "Oh, there's not enough ice. Are you dumb? You're so stupid," or something like that. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I would put more water and put my ice in it. And then the next day she would ask for a glass of water and I would give her the same amount of ice I had the last time, right? And she's like, "I don't want that much ice. How fucking dumb are you? You can't even get a cup of water, and stuff like that." So I would do
Jeez.
be a moving target. So every day I would blame myself and say, "Why didn't I know she wanted 10 cubes today because today's hotter?" Or how come I didn't know she wanted 1 cube because it's colder? Whatever it was. Or she wanted warm water today. Why, how stupid am I that I wasn't able to read her mind?
Yeah.
So I blamed myself with it. And then so it led to what your client was saying, disappointing people. I just felt like I was constantly disappointing her. But if you're disappointing a toxic person with a moving target, it's like, yeah, are you really disappointing her? She's going to be disappointed anyway.
Yeah. I think you are disappointing the toxic person, but are you a disappointing person in general is the
Oh,
question.
yeah, yeah.
And no, you're not a disappointing person in general. You're actually trying really hard to make an impossible person happy. And unfortunately, there's a lot of those people in this world, but you bring up an excellent point because your question was, what if you don't know the person well enough to filter the information? And when
Mm.
you're little like that, you don't know. You don't have the capacity to think about things in that way. When we're growing up developmentally, we're very egocentric. So if somebody's giving us that kind of feedback, we do accept it 100%. We think that is, I mean, my daughter gets in trouble and she says, "I'm such a bad kid." No, you're not. Nobody even said that. You just did something wrong. Like, oh, well, let it go. Move on with your life.
So how does she be okay now, knowing that she doesn't have the cognitive awareness to explain this different story to herself? How do you catch that now at her age to try to keep her from keeping a story of self-hatred or something, right?
Well, for her, I will be honest, it is very difficult. Because she is so dramatic. But I try to tell her, You are not a bad kid. You have never done anything bad enough that I'm not gonna love you. And I don't know that you can, to be honest. Um, and I tell her all the good things about herself
Aw.
and, things like that. Give her lots of hugs and kisses.
Aw, cute.
She asked me one day, I was really frustrated with the two of them, and she said, do you regret having two kids?
Oh, oh my God, what did you say? Oh.
I said, absolutely not.
Some days. No, but I
Sometimes, at some moments, yes, of course. I'm like, God, why did I have kids? But do I regret that you're here? No, no.
yeah, that's sweet. I think there's such a great opportunity now being a therapist, having young kids and showing them that there's a better way. I don't know, did you struggle when you were younger? So now that you pay more attention so that your kids don't go through the struggle you do?
I try. I definitely try. But unfortunately, I am a flawed human being. So I know that I mess up with them and I know that they will have things to complain to their therapist about.
Well, instead of using the word flawed human being, it has such a negative connotation. We're just, you know, happily imperfect.
There we go. Look how cute that is. That's so uplifting.
Much better than flawed. Oh, I'm just a flawed human being. I can't do anything about it. It's like, no.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like in life we have two choices. We can say, this is just who I am, and that's it. Or we can say, I want to constantly be improving.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, I want to constantly challenge myself and try to be constantly improving so that one day I can self actualize and become the nicest old lady you've ever met.
I would love that. And that actually is a book, a really famous book. It's a female author. I'm terrible at names. We need like one of those fact checkers in our
We
podcast.
need to like Google this
Yeah,
right
yeah.
away.
A person that's in the background going, "Nya, nya, 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 nya. Hey, what was that? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." Anyways, so she's a female author and she talked about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And then she makes examples throughout the whole thing of children that have fixed mindset and where they are 20 years later or something, or adults that have that, and where their mental health is, their level of mental health and mental self-esteem, self-worth. And really, I think that growth mindset is everything. It just will keep you out of that victim mentality. And so you don't get stuck somewhere. You hurt, you feel the pain, and then you realize, okay, what can I do about it now?
Yeah, that's a big part of the mental health world, is that we do get stuck. And literally, if you look at the neurology, there we go, that's the
Mm.
word, of the whole thing, we have certain pathways that just kind of play on repeat. And the more we dive into those thought patterns and emotional patterns that exist within us, the deeper those grooves get in the brain. And so the harder it is to come out of that way of thinking and being. And literally, when we have to create a new way of thinking and being, we have to rewire our brain to a different pathway and to travel different pathways. So it's actually a real thing that we literally get stuck in a way of being.
Wow. I didn't
Thing
know.
happens with addiction.
Oh, that makes sense, because if you think about it, we need to condition our brains to think a different way. Oh, and then because I like the physical explanation of it. So now it's like, oh, now it makes sense with the mental training and conditioning. And how you go, I'm gonna, start a new, New Year's resolutions. Oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna eat healthy. I'm gonna whatever. But if it's not conditioned enough, you're just gonna fall back to those grooves in your brain that you've had for years.
Right. That's one of the reasons that people are really liking ketamine and psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca, because those things help rewire the brain. Unfortunately, I don't know how lasting the effects are. I mean, I really truly don't know the research on that.
I did that. I did ayahuasca, and I've done some shroom, journeys and everything. And I do want to say, when I took ayahuasca, I want to say maybe 5, 7 years ago now, it's changed my life. I'm so beyond grateful for ayahuasca and this entire journey that I've been taking. It just feels like, and this is what I've heard, that's like 700 hours of therapy. And that's where it really makes sense when it comes to your grooves and your addiction. I was addicted to one way of thinking. I was addicted of being a victim of abusive relationships and toxic relationships. So I've always believed in what they said. I wasn't enough. I just wasn't good enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I was this. It was always something I wasn't enough, and I was fighting that. So on the surface, I fought it so hard that and a lot of times no one knew, because I was so addicted to trying to be perfect. Right? I walked the walk, I talked the talk, I did everything on the surface, and I laughed and I did this, and I was always smiley and bubbly, and no one knew how much pain I was in all the time.
Yeah.
And even Lady Gaga was sharing how she has, I forgot what she has, but she has something where your brain actually creates physical pain in your body.
Oh
And
yeah, so MADA disorder.
I don't know, I can't even start to pronounce that word, but she has that, but if you see her, she's acting in movies, she's singing, she's doing all these, she's on tour, you don't see that part of her. You don't see that she's in head to toe pain 24/7, right? Yeah. I think, I'm not trying to compare myself to Lady Gaga or anything, but a little miniature 0.000% of that. But like, I was acting very perfect for a long time. And it was nice for the ayahuasca to open that up, and it felt like it cleared out all those grooves, and I was able to make new grooves.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes one of the really cool things about being able to rewire your brain is that sometimes it's just shifting our perspective a little bit. It's not like we have to throw out everything we thought. We can just shift the perspective a little bit and it feels totally different.
Mm,
So, I mean, ayahuasca is like a big way to do that, from what I understand.
it is.
But sometimes we can do it through little shifts in our perspective too. But it's, interesting what you're saying, because as little kids, you basically got conditioned to be in abusive relationships really early. Like whoever that was that didn't like the amount of ice in the cup, that person was already conditioning you to be in an abusive relationship, because abusers are people who can never be pleased. No matter what you do, even if you do exactly what they ask, there will be a problem and it will be your fault.
Yeah. And it wasn't even, it was like I was molested at 6 years old, actually. So it started at such a young age. And so people that were around me, I just went for the familiar, right? The more toxic the person was, the more familiar it was. So it felt more comfortable, even though it was more dangerous for me.
Yeah. That's an excellent insight there, because we are attracted to what is familiar, and we can change that. We can
With the
change what
groove
we're
in my
attracted to.
brain, I got to be groovy in different ways.
I said to a client recently that, when the nice guy wins, when a woman's been abused enough.
No.
That's when the nice guy starts to look real appealing.
Oh man, I only like nice guys, so I think I'm good. I'm like,
Now,
nah,
perhaps. Yeah,
that's true. It was decades of not so nice guys. Man, that could be a whole new episode.
sure can.
Have
All
you
right.
always
So
had high self-esteem growing up?
what?
Have you always had high self-esteem growing up?
That's a good question. I don't I don't know. I mean, I think that I had insecurities and I had anxiety. I've always had anxiety. Like, talk about 6 years old, that's when my anxiety got really bad. So,
Oh,
and I remember it. So I have had, as an anxious person, I guess you could say, insecurities that come along with that. And I think everybody has insecurities. And I think as women, that's a whole other story too, because we tend to think that we have to look like Victoria's Secret models in order to attract a partner. And damn near nobody looks like Victoria's Secret models.
right.
So then it's a lifetime of feeling like you're not good enough or pretty
Yeah,
enough or skinny enough or have a big enough butt or big enough boobs
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever.
And honestly, Victoria's Secret models don't look like Victoria's Secret models. You know what I mean? They don't look like. Do you know how much Photoshop is in those photos, and then all even behind the scenes of like the fashion shows and everything? There's a lot going on, smoke and mirrors. So it's hard to put yourself against perfection. Just it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and what is now, we have filters and we have contouring for makeup. I don't even know how to do that, but it's a thing I see on TikTok, so I know it exists.
I will contour your face. You won't even look like yourself. I'm just kidding.
Exactly, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So what is reality anyway? And so we grow up with all of these, just, I don't know, automatic thoughts and automatic ways of thinking and being. And it isn't until we have the capacity to think about things in a different way that we can start to challenge those things.
Yeah.
And
What
I
a good
I feel like we don't really have the capacity until around like 25.
I really don't think so. I don't think anybody should be allowed to be married or anything until they're 30. Like they have to go through all that before they decide a life partner. And I think that would reduce the number of divorces. So do you know yourself?
That's an interesting take. My old boss, like my very first boss in this field, she didn't get married until she was 30. And while I was working with her, her and her husband took the kids to college. And when they dropped the last kid off at college, they were driving home and her husband told her he wanted a divorce and they hadn't loved her for years. And she had no idea. And
None?
she thought that she had done everything right as far as like waiting and getting married later. And she was all excited about dropping the kids off to college because they could really focus on each other. And then he drops this bomb on her.
Oh my God. Okay, never mind. Maybe that honestly, I threw an arbitrary arbitrary age out there. So really it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if we can control for it, even if we made people go to therapy or we made people take a personality test or something. I don't think we can control for it.
no, I don't think we control any of it. And I think what we can control is our internal happiness, which I think is an amazing segue to next week's episode where we're talking about internal happiness and how you're really fully in control of that, at least.
Yes. Well, and yeah, what our responsibility is in our happiness. Because I think we think that happiness is something we can attain instead of something we have a responsibility to build.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good way of saying that.
All right. Well, we'll dig into that more next time.
Yeah, guys. For joining
Therapy
us.
is dope.
Thanks for joining us this
Bye. Welcome to Therapy is Dope with Alicia
and Julie. Let's make self-help fun again. No, seriously, laughter is the best medicine.
Come and join us as we introduce new ways of thinking and being.
And hopefully get you laughing along the way.